everyone, and welcome to the latest of our FrenchEntrée webinars. My name is Zoe Smith. I'm the digital editor of FrenchEntrée, and in this webinar today, we're going to be focusing on moving to France and managing a second home in France. I'm going to be hosting this webinar for you this morning, and I'm also joined by a panel of experts from our partners at French Plans, Les Bons Voisins, Cranbury's Removals, and Tricel, and I'll introduce you to those in just a moment. Before we get started today, we are recording today's webinar, and it will be available to stream for free over on our website and also over on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, do go and subscribe to the FrenchEntrée YouTube channel. We are publishing weekly Q&As from our webinar series, so you won't want to miss out on them. We're also streaming live to Facebook this morning, so welcome to anyone who is watching us from over there. For those of you that aren't familiar with FrenchEntrée, we are part of the France Media Group, who are specialist publishers covering all aspects of French life and culture, from travel to gastronomy to buying property. FrenchEntrée itself has been a leading resource for French property buyers since 2003. Not only do we help buyers to find their dream property in France, we also help and advise with every aspect of the property buying journey. We have a vast network of trusted partners on the ground in France, which includes real estate agents, mortgage providers, currency exchange specialists, legal and financial advisors, right down to architects, surveyors, removals firms, health insurance providers. Essentially, whatever questions you need answering, we can point you in the right direction. You may also be familiar with the FrenchEntrée magazine, and we also produce a free weekly newsletter written by myself. And if you're not already subscribed to that, you can head over to the FrenchEntrée website after the webinar and sign up. And if you're looking to buy property in France, I'd also recommend signing up to become a FrenchEntrée member. It's completely free to sign up, and it gives you access to some really useful features, such as customizable property alerts, as well as free advice from our property team and mortgage advisors. In terms of the content today, this is the third and final installment of our three-part Destination France webinars, focusing on buying and moving to France in 2021 and beyond. Don't worry, we have plenty more webinars planned for the coming months. In our previous two webinars, we have focused on the current property market in France and currency exchange, the tax and healthcare considerations for those of you looking to move to France, as well as inheritance and financial planning. And both of those webinars are available to stream for free over on our website and YouTube channel. In today's webinar, we're moving on to the final step in your property buying journey. We'll be focusing on all the practical elements of making the move to France and enjoying your new French home. I'm joined today by a panel of 4 experts who've kindly given up their time to share their insight with us and answer your questions. We're aiming for a runtime of around 90 minutes today, and each of our speakers are going to give a short presentation, after which I'll be putting some of your questions to them. We'll also be conducting a couple of polls throughout just to make sure you're all still paying attention. And we will hopefully have some extra time at the end for more questions. So do make sure you stick around until the end of the webinar. You can put your questions in the Q&A box on your screen at any time throughout. Please do use the Q&A function, not the chat box for this, otherwise we might miss them. And if you're watching this on Facebook, you can leave a comment and one of my colleagues will pick that up. If we don't get a chance to answer your questions today, please do be assured that we have read all of them and we will endeavor to answer them. As digital editor, I always listen carefully to the questions and concerns that you have, and that always helps direct the kind of content that I'll be looking to create for both our website and our future webinars. So do please take this opportunity to let us know what's on your mind. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts, and another big thank you to all of them for taking part this morning. First up will be Arthur Cutler from French Plans, France's only nationwide bilingual planning, design and architectural service. He's going to be offering some advice for those of you looking to renovate your French properties. Next, we have Carmel O'Connell from Les Bons Voisins, who specialize in French property management. And she's going to be talking us through some of the key considerations for owning a second home or holiday home in France. Following Carmel will be Karen Davies from Cranbury's Removals, one of the UK's largest international removal companies. She's going to be focusing on removals to France and storage solutions for those of you making the move. Last but certainly not least, we have Jean-Philippe from Tricel, who are France's largest manufacturer of sewage and wastewater treatment systems. This is something that is essential for many rural French property owners, and he's going to be talking us through the different options available. So that is more than enough from me. So let's go straight over to our first speaker today, which is Arthur Cutler from French Plans. Over to you, Arthur.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. It says, here we go. Oops. Okay. Good morning. Yes, just a little bit of history about French Plans. We've been here for just over 25 years. So we have experience in thousands, literally thousands of planning applications and architectural projects throughout the country. As Zoe mentioned, we have nationwide coverage. So irrespective of where you find yourselves buying a property or renovating a property, we can help you with our local experts as well. There's a team of us dotted around the countryside. So wherever you are, we have somebody relatively close by. It's a fully bilingual service, so that for those who don't speak French or aren't fluent in French, any issues that we can help with, we're perfectly capable of doing that. We're a registered French business, planning consultants, project management, and heritage consultants for architectural projects on heritage buildings. Our team includes qualified and French registered architects with the Orders Architect, which is a prerequisite for practicing the occupation here in France. We offer a full range of residential and commercial services, and we offer a free initial consultation and pre-purchase planning verification. A quick word on that last point for anybody who might be thinking of buying a property but would probably require some form of modification that requires planning consent, then we can offer a consultation for free at that moment in time before you actually start the purchase process, so that you don't find yourselves later on in the situation where potentially you're buying something for which you can't undertake the project. Okay, so on to the first section, which is dispelling some myths. These are here intentionally because we have lots and lots of people who share things with us over the course of the years, and we think this is a very useful thing to show you. First of which, typical planning offices in France don't look like this. Some do. I know a couple that actually look considerably worse than this, but they shall remain nameless for the purposes of our discussion today. Secondly, and this is really important, you will read and you will hear lots of people say that the best way to approach your project and to ingratiate yourself into the community is to go and see the mayor and say, I need a planning application and I'd like your consent for this, please. The mayor of the village or the town or the community is not responsible for approving your planning application. Calling into the town hall, which is called the mairie here in France, with a couple of photographs of your project and a couple of nice bottles of red wine, regrettably, is no longer sufficient. Back in the good old days it was, but I'm afraid those days are long gone. When is a permit required? Really important here. Potentially any change to the external appearance of a property requires a permit. And that can even be minor changes, such as changes to the materials of doors or windows, and in some cases even the paint color changes. So beware, don't just go ahead and do something before you check out what needs to be done. In addition to that, any increase in the taxable or habitable space of a property, new builds, extensions, conversions, etc., pools, sheds, and even greenhouses in France are considered habitable space. So you do need consent for those. And finally, any change of use. Typically, people often buy barn conversions or garage they want to convert into a living space. Those things also require a change of use and planning consent. A word of warning, the vendor, the agent, the man in the bar has stated that I don't need permission to walk or extend the buildings. Yes, you do. We hear this a lot also where somebody says, oh, a friend told me that a friend of theirs said that they did it without planning consent, etc. That's all very well until the point where perhaps sometime in the future you want to sell your property, and the notaire will compare the description of the property when you bought it and now that it's ready for sale. And if there's a difference between the two, the first thing they will do is ask you where your planning consent is. At that time, if you need to deal with a retrospective permission, imagine the planners are not going to be in any hurry to process your application quickly just because it's now time for you to sell. This is common. I've been told that I can set up a small campsite or glamping business without permission. No, you can't. No matter how large or small that business is. If you want to set something up in a rural area, for example, you do need consent. And there are some areas where it's specifically forbidden to set up that kind of business. So proceed with caution. And the next one is I have a CU, which is roughly the same as an outline permit in the UK. So I'm guaranteed to get detailed consent, am I not? Not necessarily is the answer. So again, just looking back at if you're in the purchase process and somebody says to you, yes, I'll sell you my property. Yes, I'm happy to deal with that. as an outline application that may not necessarily translate into detailed consent at a later time. Okay, the planning framework and zoning in France. First of all, wherever there is no local plan, national regulations apply, and these are used throughout France wherever that doesn't exist. This simply divides the commune into constructible and non-constructible zones based loosely on the proximity to the urban centre. Where there are local regulations, the commune will be divided into zones via a detailed planning framework, and those will be areas such as industrial, agricultural, residential, etc. So wherever you end up with your project, you need to double check what the regulations are for that specific property. And in France, throughout the country, there are lots and lots of what we call protected zones. So architecturally sensitive, close to historic buildings or ancient dolmens and that kind of thing. So you need to be aware that those could affect your planning application and the project itself going forward. The main types of planning application are these. The first is the simplest in many respects, the certificate of urbanism that I referred to earlier, which is roughly equivalent to outline permission in the UK. Next up is a déclaration préalable, which is for minor works, things like adding a Velux window, very small extensions, changing paint colours of your shutters, etc., etc. The most common of these is the permis de construire, which is a full planning application, which will apply to most extensions, certainly all new builds, certainly conversions of barns, etc., etc. So that's the one you're most likely to come across. For larger developments, we have what's called the permis d'aménager, and that will be for hotels, industrial estates, large campsites, that kind of thing. Most of you may not come across that, but it's worth bearing in mind that it may apply to a project if it's larger than just a single project, single dwelling. This is really important here. Unlike the UK, there are no state fees for submitting planning applications in France. So you can apply as many times as you like without cost as far as the state is concerned. There is a tax implication, which I'll come to in a little while. Validity period, an outline application is valid for 18 months. That can be renewed at the end of that 18 months, provided the planning regulations haven't changed in the meantime. A full permis de construire is valid for 3 years. And work must begin within that time and be continuous. And the definition of that in France is no break of more than 12 months. If you can't begin works within that three-year period, then it's possible to extend it, usually for 1 year at a time. But again, that applies if the planning regulations haven't changed in the meantime. Planning dossier typically comprises a list of these things: a complete dossier, number of plans, drawings, and associated paperwork; location plan, which is just a bit like a Google plan, to be honest; site plan with services, connections, and dimensions; topographical points, boundary limits, etc.; cross-section of the land and any buildings; before and after elevations, facade drawings; floor plans before and after; close and long range photographs; description of the project, which needs to be in a specific format to comply with the French process; application forms and tax declarations; where applicable, a septic tank report, soil test and certificate of conformity, which I know JP will be addressing a bit later; and in most cases a thermal insulation report, currently called an RT 2012 because it began in the year 2012. But that will be changing at the end of this year to RT 2021, where the regulations will be actually significantly more difficult. Okay, so who can submit a planning application? If it's a private dwelling, the property owner, a planning consultant, an architect, friend of the family, brother, sister, anybody else, provided an architect is not legally required. And in those cases, it's where a habitable floor area or of a building exceeds 150 square meters. It also applies to any form of commercial application. Please note a UK or other non-French registered architect is not acceptable in France. So it comes to submitting the dossier. It goes initially to the mairie, the town hall, and they will pass it to a number of other organisations and authorities where applicable, the regional planning office, service providers, electricity, water, etc., to make sure that there are adequate supplies for your property, regional architect where it's in a sensitive or architectural zone, and the agricultural department where applicable. What happens next? An official receipt will be issued by the mairie, and that will be used to follow the process throughout. Timescale: the authorities have 1 month to process the application and request any additional information or documentation, and you will then receive the final outcome between 1 and 3 months after the dossier is complete. Post-approval: there's a one-off tax, varies from region to region and commune to commune. So typically, The lowest end of the scale is around 15 euros per square metre of floor space created, and it can be as high as 60 or 70 euros per square metre in more expensive areas in France. Post-approval action, you need to put up a planning notice where it can be seen on the public highway. You then need to submit a start of works declaration and a completion of works declaration when everything is complete, and another tax declaration. If you need professional help, we're just a phone call or an email away. We're always happy to give a free, no obligation opinion on any French planning matter. Thank you very much, Zoe. I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Arthur. There's a lot of really useful advice and tips in there for those of you looking to build or renovate a French property. Right, we're now going to put a few of your questions to Arthur. So, first question. I want to carry out minor renovations to my French property. How do I know if I need planning permission or not?
Okay, in very simple terms, if the modifications and renovations are internal only and don't result in any external changes, you don't need consent. But, and there's a proviso to that, if you're developing an area which is currently not habitable, so for example, renovating into an unused barn at present, then you will need consent for that, even though all the works might be internal. In practice, in that case, normally there would be external modifications as well, because barns tend to have no doors or no windows or what have you, so that would automatically apply. Any external change, no matter how minor, potentially needs planning.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question. I'm a builder from the UK and I want to renovate my French property myself. Other than seeking the correct planning permissions, are there any other regulations that might prevent me carrying out the work myself? And could this be a problem if I wanted to sell the property in the future?
Yep, the last part of that question is the most important. No, there is nothing to stop you undertaking all or any of the works yourself, but there is a proviso here that if you're not a French registered builder with appropriate décennale insurance, which is a bit like a 10-year guarantee, then in the event of you carrying out those works and selling the property within 10 years of completion, you will be personally responsible for any shortfalls or errors or incidents that occur within the balance of those 10 years. So to give you an example, if you completed a project today and in 5 years' time you want to sell, then for a further 5 years, you will be personally responsible to repair, replace, or otherwise fix any problems that arise in the future.
Wow, so that's a very good question to ask at this stage now. Okay, we're going to stop there with the questions for now. Thank you, Arthur. But we will be coming back to Arthur with some more questions at the end of the webinar. So remember to drop them in the Q&A box at any time throughout if you'd like him to answer them. So before we go over to our next speaker, I'm going to put the first of our polls up on the screen. I'll just get that for you. Here we go. So you should be seeing that on your screen now. So the question is, what is your current situation in France? Do you currently live in France? Are you a second home or holiday home owner? Are you looking to purchase a French property so you haven't already bought one? Or are you, there's a little typo in that, choice 4, hoping to move to or retire to France in the future? So perhaps you do own a property or you're looking to own one, but you hope to move or retire to. So I'll give you, I think half of you have answered, so I'll give you a little bit more time and then we'll see what, all right, results are coming in. Just give you a few more seconds to answer. I think a few of you haven't answered yet. So yeah, so what is your current situation in France? Okay, I think most of you have answered, so I'll go ahead and I will share those results with you. You should be able to see them on your screen. So vast majority are hoping to move to or retire to in France, which makes sense being as this webinar is concerning moving to France. Closely followed by looking to purchase a French property, followed by people who are already a second home or currently a holiday homeowner in France, and just 6% of you currently live in France. Okay, thank you very much for taking part in that. I will stop sharing those results. And we're now going to go over to our next speaker, which is Carmel O'Connell from Les Bons Voisins. Over to you, Carmel.
Thank you, Zoe. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so he said, my name is Carmel O'Connell. My husband, Joe Wilson, and I run Les Bons Voisins here in France. Les Bons Voisins is a property management network that was established in 2002. And we currently have 18 teams of property managers throughout France and a number of others in the pipeline with, waiting to join us. We provide property management services to second homeowners, as well as to some residents in France as well. Some local French people, as well as some expats that live in France. So our network covers over 500 properties. So that covers, as I said, some local, as well as a very broad international client base. We also recruit and train individuals and couples into our network, enabling them to live and work in France. So whatever your reasons are for buying a second home, be that a place to get away from it all, or a place to have quantity and quality time with your family, or possibly the home where you'll spend your retirement. When you own your holiday home, you can have everything stocked and ready so that you can start to enjoy your holiday from the moment you arrive. But to ensure peace of mind and enjoyment of your home, it is important that your home is secure and well maintained. And there are ways that you can achieve this. So, there's nothing worse than arriving at a holiday home after a long absence and seemingly longer journey, and having the excitement of being there turn cold when you see that your beloved property has been broken into, and the start of your well-deserved holiday is now marred with calls to the insurance company clearing up and making the property secure again. Unfortunately, this can happen, but in arguably more remote locations are more at risk, but there are various measures that many of them very simple that can be taken to secure the property and dissuade would-be intruders. There are physical deterrents that you can employ, such as always ensure shutters, windows, locks are in good condition and are properly fitted. And it may sound obvious, but ensuring that every time you leave the property, they are actually locked. You may want to consider installing a horizontal security bar that latches onto the inside of shutters. This helps prevent them from being forced open. Also, again, it may sound obvious, but do not leave spare keys under rocks or flower pots. If needed, correctly install a suitable combination of key safe. Do not leave tools, ladders, or other such items in plain sight or unsecured, as these could assist opportunists to gain entry to the property. And also keep attractive items out of sight. As far as technical deterrents are concerned, you may want to consider installing motion-activated lighting. These would trigger a bright light to light up vulnerable areas after dark. Or you may consider, if you already have internet access at the property, CCTV cameras and an alarm system that notify you or your first responders when they are activated. There are other devices like timer devices to activate various internal lights, or for example, a radio at different times of the day to imitate the property being occupied. The other option then is manpower. Ideally, you may want to consider a suitable company or individual to maintain your property and garden, as well as conduct regular security checks. Or you may inform a trusted neighbour when you're away and ask them to look out for any unusual activity. So keeping your property well maintained suggests that it's less likely to be targeted, because it suggests that it's occupied or someone's attending to it on a regular basis. So if the grass and hedges are cut, it indicates that, someone's around, someone's, popping by at intervals, and it hasn't been abandoned. So keeping up with repairs. It sounds like it would be intuitive, but when homeowners are away for extended periods, it can be easy to let the minor repairs slip through the cracks. And soon these minor repairs become big ones. If you don't feel up to hacking your way through an overgrown garden, waiting for the chimney sweep to arrive, or fiddling around with leaky pipes, or having your faucet emptied during your time off, consider investing in a regular property manager who can manage these things for you while you're away. Having a professional eye on the lookout for smaller issues can help you catch them early so they aren't worsening while you're away. Even with a good repair and maintenance routine, nature also, plays its part. So, consider whether, the inclement weather at different times of the year may be worthwhile, having someone checking on your property after a storm, for example. A number of property managers have discovered various things along the way. For example, as I said, nature and how it takes its toll on empty properties, various creatures that like to make their way indoors during the winter months or even in the spring. So, for example, opening up the shutters and only to find that there's bees or hornets nest inside. These are regular things that we find, but they're all manageable. So over 50% of buyers these days are purchasing a holiday home with a view to renting it out. This is another way of ensuring that your property is cared for by having someone occupying it. It's worth considering whether you approach a property rental company or you go it alone. So what would you need to do? Well, you'd need to decide on your level of involvement, whether you want to do the marketing yourself, whether you want to do the booking management. You may want to consider creating a website all about your property. If you do this, it means that you could also include as much information as you would like, or you may decide to go down the route of registering your property on one of the various booking websites. You may decide to prepare your property ahead of a rental season, for example, and this could involve decluttering or removing your precious and sentimental items and locking them away in a lockable space within the property. You may also consider that or ensure that non-negotiable items are in place. For example, that the property is clean, there is good bedding, and there is living and dining room seating for the number of people who can actually sleep in the property. So families aren't in a situation where they're taking shifts at the dining table because there aren't enough places to seat everybody. And you may also want to maximize your booking by having, other facilities, for example, internet access. This tends to be a must-have these days. Or you may consider having English and French TV and various other things to entertain guests, like books and games. It is important also to make sure that you make the appropriate declarations. So if you're going down the route of renting your property during the holiday season, you should register with the local MRI, and you should also make sure that any income that you earn from it is declared in France. And the other thing, of course, is find a good property manager who can help you prepare your property or provide a whole range of services if you're not able to get there to do it yourself. Your second home should always be a place for relieving your stress and not adding to it. So making sure it's in top shape might seem like extra work now, but it will prevent your holiday home from turning down a bad road further down the track, especially if the work is accumulating. If you need help with managing your second home, feel free to contact us or check out our website. We have an owner's Q&A on there, which you may find helpful. And if you're looking to find a property manager for the area where you're looking to buy a house or have a house, then check out our map. If you can't find anyone on there covering your area, get in touch with us, because we have people in the pipeline on their way in, and you never know when someone may be coming to your area. Okay, that's it. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Carmel. I'm sure that was really helpful for many of our second home and holiday home owners. So I'm now going to put a couple of your questions to Carmel. So first up, what does a typical house inspection visit look like? What sort of things do you check?
Okay, so a typical house inspection visit would do a circuit of the external of the property to make sure, for example, like shutters, doors, gates, that they're all secure. If there are any external buildings, we would also check those to make sure, you know, the locks haven't been tampered with, for example. We would also check things like guttering, make sure that, you know, for example, you know, in heavy rain, for example, that the gutterings aren't backing up. And we would also do an internal inspection in the property because, like I said, you know, certain times of the year, critters and creatures make their way into the property. So we would look out for things like, you know, whether there's any dust that may be coming from wood beams, or it's amazing what these voles chew up. So, and they can leave their trail basically. So, yeah, we're looking out for all kinds of things like that. Usually when we go to a property as well, we would take the opportunity to take meter readings as well, whether that's for water. These days, a lot of electricity is on the Linky meter, so the owners themselves can look out for that. But, you know, we'll take various meter readings. And if there is a pool there as well, if that's a service that we're also covering, we would watch out for things like that. So we're on the lookout for things like leaks, any damage, ensuring that the property is secure, ensuring that it doesn't look abandoned. I think that answers your question.
Great, thank you. I'm sure that's really useful. Okay, next question. We are considering letting out our French property as a gîte or holiday rental. How much can we expect to make, and what other costs should we consider beforehand?
Okay, how much can you expect to make? I mean, that's how long is a piece of string kind of question, because it really depends on what your gîte offers and how big it is, for example, what facilities you have there. What I would suggest you do is you go online, have a look at gîtes in your area, and if there's anything similar that has the same number of rooms, same number of facilities, whether it has a pool or not, whether it's close to other amenities. And if you find something that's similar to yours, you can gather information about what they charge and do your research in that way. Then in terms of how much you can earn, it depends again on how long you are letting it out for. Is it just for the peak season, or is it, I mean, these days the seasons are well, all over the place at the moment, but the seasons have been known to extend from March, April through to October, because you get different people coming through at different stages. So you would want to consider how long you would want to be open for. So that's another factor. As far as costs are concerned, well, again, how much of this are you doing yourself? You might want to think about, again, preparing the property. How are you going to advertise it? How are you going to market it? If you've fixed your pricing structure, you can do your own research on that, for example, or you can engage a property manager to help you with that, who has experience in the area, for example. The other cost considerations would be if you're engaging someone to help you with preparing the property, for example, doing a deep clean at the beginning of the season, making sure that everything is ready for guests' arrival. There are a correct number of cutlery and crockery, for example, because all of these things make a difference to the individual and the guests and the enjoyment of their stay. In addition to that, it's a case of who's going to do the changeovers. So if you're doing it yourself, then that's fine. But if you're engaging someone else to do it, think about those costs. There are laundry costs as well. So in a nutshell, advertising, marketing, preparing of the property, changeover costs, laundry costs, and of course the upkeep of the property itself.
Thank you, Carmel. Had lots of things to think about there for people that are potential gîte owners. So we'll stop there with the questions for now for Carmel. But remember, if you do still have a question for her, do put it in the Q&A box. We'll have a little bit more time at the end for more questions. And now, before we go over to our third speaker, we're going to do another quick poll. So I'm just going to put that up on the screen for you. Let me just find it. Here we go. So this one is a multiple choice question, so you can click as many as you want of the answers. And the question is, which of the following topics would you like FrenchEntrée to cover more of? So this is just simply a question. We'd like to know what are you interested in? What would you like us to cover more of? Whether that's on the website through articles, whether that's in our magazine through articles in the magazine, or expert Q&As, or maybe it's for a subject of another webinar. Just let us know what you're interested in. Lots of different answers coming up there. I'll give you another few seconds to answer. Yeah, you're still all answering very quickly, so I'm going to give you a little bit more time. But yeah, this is a really useful question for me as a digital editor. I'm very interested in hearing what you want to know more about, what kind of content we should create in the future for you all. Right, it looks like you've all finished, so I will end this poll and I will share the results with you. So, lots of different subjects here. A lot of you interested in visas and residency. For those of you that are, we do have a new section on our website. If you go on the Moving to France area, there is a whole section on visas and residency. There are new articles that are coming up in probably by the end of this week and more in the future. So do keep having a look on there. Doing the best to get to the bottom of all your questions on that. Other questions that seem to be healthcare. Again, we do have a webinar coming up. I'll talk more about that at the end, but that will be covering healthcare. So that's one you might want to be interested in. Tax and legal matters, always very popular. Retirement, property renovations, removals. You're interested in most things, not so many interested in COVID coverage. Myself as well, far too much of that in our newsletters at the moment, unfortunately. Okay, great. Right, I'll stop sharing that. Thank you very much for everyone that's taken part. That's really useful information, and we will look to create some content on those subjects for you in the very near future. Right. Let's go over to our third speaker, which is Karen Davies from Cranbury's Removals. So over to you, Karen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Davies, and I'm one of the co-owners of Cranbury Removals. We're based just outside of Winchester. In fact, I can see Marwell Zoo over to my right, the entrance to there. We're a family-run business. Tim is the owner. I run the office. We have two sons who are the main drivers for our European removals, and our other staff that work with us have all been with us for years and years. I'm going to share my room with you now, and we can have a bit of a chat. There we go. So we cover removals to and from France. We can move your whole house. So if you're moving lock, stock and barrel from the UK over to France. And we can also do what we call part loads. So if you've just got a few items that you want taken over to an existing property, we can do that. We can either collect from a UK address, or we can arrange, or you can arrange to have deliveries direct to our site, and then we'll bring them out with us on our next trip in your direction. This happens quite a lot. We have lots of deliveries from John Lewis and Amazon and all sorts of different things people have. This week we've had windows, radiators, and all sorts delivered to our site, and we're arranging to drop them off the next time we're passing. We also have two warehouses on our site, and what we've found over the last couple of years, that people are selling their UK property with the view to moving to France, but they actually haven't bought a property over there yet. So we've packed them up, brought everything into our warehouses, and once they have bought a property, we'll then load up onto the vehicles to take them out to France. This week we've had a couple whose items have been in store actually for about 18 months. we're delivering. We're starting to unload at midday French time today, and we'll get that all unloaded, and then the crew are going down to Saint-Tropez to bring a customer back in to the UK. We moved him out there 10 years ago, and he's moving back. So the services that a removal company can offer are many and varied. We can do a full all part packing service for you. You can do your own packing, we're more than happy to do that, and we can give you boxes and all the packing materials you would need. Or we can come into your house literally as it is today and pack everything into boxes, prepare everything ready to be moved. Some people are happy to do, their own items, but when it comes to the fragile glass, china, that sort of thing, or items in the kitchen or a dining room, so we can do a part packing service as well. Large pictures, large mirrors, your dining tables, pianos, that sort of thing. We will do what we call an export wrap on those, so that everything is wrapped and it's protected before it goes either into store or onto the lorry for moving. We can also dismantle and reassemble furniture, typically things like beds, bunk beds, wardrobes if necessary, but we can do any of those. For your clothing, we can provide temporary hanging wardrobes, very tall cardboard boxes with a rail inside, but it saves having to pack all your clothes away. And we can also arrange for crates for fragile artwork, things like chandeliers, anything that needs to be particularly protected. We can also carry vehicles on our lorries. The job that we're bringing back from Saint-Tropez, these asked us to bring his MG Midget back. So we have car ramps and all the strapping for inside the vehicles as necessary. Everything is fully insured. We use one of the leading removal company insurers in the country, and we can provide all details of those. The insurance is actually optional. We don't build it into the price and make you pay, but it's there if you want to take advantage of it. Makes no difference to how we carry out the removal if you're not insured. There are a few post-Brexit changes that we ought to mention. Since January the 1st, we're not allowed to transport any foodstuffs, and that includes pet food, and also plants and soil products. They can be moved into France, but they have quite tight regulations post-Brexit, all governed by DEFRA. Every plant and soil would have to be tested, and they'd have to have what's called a phytosanitary certificate. And to date, having discussed moving plants, because we know that people have their precious plants that might have particular memories, we've not come across any removal companies who've managed to get round the regulations so far to be able to do that. So I'm afraid we have to advise that we can't move those. So just quickly, that's not on the form here. If you wanted us to give you a quote for your removal, we can either send an estimator out. It's normally Tim, the owner of the business. He would come and have a look around at how much you have to be moved, any of the services that were on the previous page that you might be looking for us to do, and we'd give you a quote. And if you're happy with that, we would then look at booking in some dates in the diary. Things that we would always ask about and we need to take into account when we're working out a schedule, carrying out your removal, is what the access is like at your property in the UK and in France. The one that we're starting to unload today, beautiful property in the middle of a lovely wooded area, and we can't get our lorry anywhere near the front door to unload. So what we've done, we've arranged to hire a smaller vehicle and taken some additional help. And we do what's called a tranship. So we'll park our vehicle as close as we can, but then we'll have to unload into the smaller vehicle and we shuttle backwards and forwards. Takes a bit longer, but everything's doable. When we're working out dates for your move, we have to take into account French driving regulations. So for example, the vehicle size that we use, which tend to be 18-ton lorries, we're not allowed to drive on any Sunday. There are Saturdays throughout the summer when we're not allowed to drive. And then the other event that causes some working round, as it were, are bank holidays. And of course, you've got a bank holiday in France tomorrow. So that means that wherever our vehicle is at 10 o'clock tonight, it cannot move at all until 10 o'clock tomorrow night. So we just make notes in our diary, but it can affect the dates that we can deliver. Obviously, dates of completion on your UK and French properties, what available ferry crossings there are, and at the moment everything's running completely to schedule. Obviously last year they had less sailings. And then there are actually the HGV regulations, which although we're out of the EU, we're still following all the regulations. So our drivers can only drive for certain hours, amount of hours during the day before they have to take rest breaks. And then they have overnight rest breaks, and they also have to take weekly ones. And the most important thing I would suggest that this does affect for a full house removal is that we tend to try and load up towards the end of week 1. Our drivers can have their rest break over the weekend, and then we would head off to France on the Monday. So we would look, if we were delivering, to deliver at the front end of a week. And then if we are able to bring someone back at the same time, that happens at the end of the week. So we just ask you to work with us, give us the dates, for example, that you need to be out of your UK property, and then when you get the keys to your French property. And then one of the biggest questions that we're being asked constantly is what the changes are post-Brexit. And the biggest change now, instead of us just loading up, hopping on the ferry and delivering, is that we have to go through what's the customs clearance process. And that actually does involve you doing a little bit of work at your end so that we can pass on details to our UK and French customs agents, and they'll do all the work. So the bottom line actually on the screen you can see is actually the most important one. It is not as scary, it's not as daunting as it sounds. And we here at Cranbury, for example, help you through every single step of the process. One thing that people tend to get a little bit confused about is the difference between customs clearance and import duty. Customs clearance has to be done on, even if you had 1 box or 1 million boxes, customs clearance has to be done. And this is where we tell the UK going out to France, we tell our UK agent what we're taking out, we tell the French agent what we're bringing in, and providing all the documents, which I'm going to run through on the next page, can be provided. Import duty, which is tax on the value of your goods, import duty is VAT, then you won't have to pay any import duty. Our French agents are very good, and I can say that to date, since we did our first removal post-Brexit the 2nd week of January, and all the moves that we've done out to France, all the paperwork that he's been given have resulted in not one person having to pay the 20% VAT. So that's always a good thing. Can be a little bit different if you're coming back from France though. So the documents that we would require for a duty-free import into France, and what we do is we ask you to send all of these to us, and then we deal with everything after that. So a copy of your passport. They ask for a proof of a UK address, the address that we're collecting the items from, and that can be in the form of a utility bill, for example. Gas, electric, water, council tax bills are always quite good. And then they want proof that we're actually delivering the items to an address in France. So then again, same sort of thing, utility bills, an attestation is acceptable as well. Something that has got the address on in France that we're delivering to. What they don't want people doing is randomly taking out a lorry load of items and floating around France and it not actually ending up at a confirmed address. There's a form that they ask you to complete, and again, we would give you a copy of the form, and they ask you to sign to say that the goods are yours and that you're not going to sell them within 6 months of arriving in France. It also asks you to group items together. So it says, for example, if you've got electrical equipment, what's the value of the electrical equipment? Toys, I think they break it down to. It's quite random what they've put on there. But you would also add vehicles to that if you're asking us to take a vehicle out, or if you're actually driving a vehicle over to France. What we advise is that you add that to the inventory of goods that are being imported. So the inventory then, we have a sample form that you can have. It's on a spreadsheet, and it just asks your name, collection address, delivery address, and then a brief list of the items that are being transported. People do get a bit worried about this. Some people go to the extent of listing absolutely every single item that they're moving, but it can actually be quite brief and concise. Beds ×3, kitchen boxes ×7, for example. And what I would say, what people do get worried about occasionally is that they might, they send me their inventory, we submit everything to customs, and then I get a phone call to say, oh, actually, I've got 15 boxes instead of 12, and that's not a problem. What they're looking for is just a general list of what's being moved. More importantly, it needs to have a total estimated value of the items, a total number of items, which if you're using the spreadsheet will automatically calculate that for you, and then an estimated weight, and we could advise you on that. And all of this information that we're asking for is required because there are boxes on the customs forms, which the agents will deal with, asking for those details. And then we do all the rest. Once you've submitted all of those to us here at Cranberry's, we'll cast our eye over them, make sure that everything's on there and it all makes sense and it all looks right. And then we send the details off to customs. They supply all the reference numbers, and then we use those when we book the ferry crossings for you. There's nothing else you need to do. And that's it. I think probably missed a few items off. As I say, we can bring people back from France as well, if needed. And there we go. I think we're there.
Thank you, Karen. I'm sure that's going to be extremely helpful for anyone looking to move to France. So I'm going to put a couple of your questions to Karen. So first one, and you just mentioned this actually, so it's very appropriate. How does the removals process work if I'm moving from France back to the UK?
Okay, so there's not quite so much paperwork needed. Basically, there are two routes of bringing your items back, and it depends on what your status is. So if you're moving your residency from France back into the UK, you'd need to go onto HMRC online and complete what's called a TOR application, TOR, which is transfer of residency. And they ask various questions on there. And you will get, again, to date, I don't know anyone who's had their application refused, unless they've made a mistake, and then they can go back in. And you'll get a TOR approval letter from HMRC. And then that means that you can bring your items back into France without having to pay any UK import duty or VAT. The exception to that is if you're bringing items back from a second or a holiday home. And I'm afraid in that event, you will have to pay tax on the value of your goods. So again, we ask you to provide us with an inventory with an estimated value of the goods. What I always advise people is to remember that in most cases, your goods are secondhand. So, the total figure that you give us, which HMRC will base the tax payment on, needs to reflect that it's not your new for old price. And when we bring people back, we also, again, do all the customs paperwork. We also deal with HMRC on your behalf and pay your tax bill, and we add it onto your bill at the end of the day.
Great, thank you very much for that. Okay, one more question. Let me just find it. We have renovations being carried out on our French home, but need to move out of our English home. Can you help with arrange storage, and what are our options?
So we have storage facilities here in the UK. So if you're moving out of your UK home, if I got this right, you're moving out of your UK home, have your items put in store, and then when you finished your French renovations, you'd want the items delivered out? Absolutely. And that's what we're doing with this customer today. He's not renovating, he just took 18 months to find a property. So we would pack everything up, bring it into our warehouse, and as I say, we're just outside of Winchester. And then when you're ready, you can get in touch and we'll arrange a date to bring your items out to you. Obviously there are storage fees involved, but we try to keep them competitive, because we're doing your full removal.
Great, thank you very much, Karen. Right, we'll have a little bit more time at the end for some more questions with Karen, so please do stick around until the end, and if you do have any more questions for her, pop them in the Q&A. But for now, let's go over to our fourth and final speaker of the day, which is Jean-Philippe Pierre from Tricel. Over to you, Jean-Philippe.
Thank you very much, Zoe. So good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my presentation. So today I'm going to talk about domestic wastewater treatment solutions in France. Okay, so few things to know. Few people play a role. There are few actors in France that we have, and few of those actors have been mentioned already. So you have the notaire, which is a solicitor. You have the agent immobilier, the estate agent, the bureau d'études that we call a BE, which is a site assessor, or the engineers. They're very, very important because they will help you on your planning and on the testing the soil for your property. The architect, so the architect, terrassier or TP, which are the ground workers and builders. And be careful when we talk to those ones, terrassier and TP, make sure they have a décennal, a civil liability for 10 years. This is very important. That was mentioned by Arthur earlier. And even if you renovate your house yourself as a homeowner, and if you sell it, within 10 years, you are responsible. You take the responsibility. So that's very, very important. Another body which is very important is Service Public d'Assainissement Non Collectif. We call that the SPANC. They're the water police, and they will sign off on your system. If they're not happy, they won't sign off, and you go back to the drawing board. So make sure they're involved from day one. The mairie, the tunnel that was mentioned as well, your first point of contact, you get loads of information. They won't do everything for you, but they can give you advice. Again, check where you live because they're not open every day. Sometimes they're only open for a few hours during the day or a few hours during the week. Local authorities, and that's more at the county level, department level. You need to check as well environmental agencies like Natura 2000. If you live or if you plan to build in a special protection areas, they are involved and they will have their say. That could be most of the time involved if you have a small commercial campsite, or if you live or you plan to have your house in a heritage place. And check with the manufacturers. Okay. Now, few things to know about wastewater treatment in France. So we call that, if you are not connected to the mains, that we call a tout à l'égout, you will need a wastewater treatment on site. So what we call that ANC, Assainissement Non Collectif, sewage treatment, and few other words that you'll face and you will see: first septic tank, micro station, which is a wastewater treatment plant, or ones is called a Tricell Novo. The micro station requires energy for the treatment of the waters. And then you have a compact filter, or filter compact, which is ours, it's called a SETA simplex, does not require energy for the treatment of the waters. That's very, very important, especially if you buy a second home, the SPANCs, so the water police, they will want to see a compact filter because there is no energy required for the treatment of the waters. And that's for one simple reason, because you'll be living only a few months during the year, and they are afraid that there is a power cut and your system fails. So they will require a compact filter with no energy for the treatment of the waters. Sizing, so roughly you go from 6 EH to 50 EH. So EH means equivalent habitant, which is people equivalent. So six equivalent, roughly 6 people for a house of 6 people living in it, and 50 EH, it's really a small commercial. Now, size depends on the house and not a number of people living in the house. This is very, very important. Because you might want to, you have a project, you buy a whole house, for example, in Department 24 in Dordogne, and you have a barn that you want to convert. So then all that will be taken into the calculation of your system. So based on the sizing, you might come up with a 20p, but during the winter, you'll have only 3 people living in it. So it means your system could be oversized for the number of people living in the house. So best might be to have 2 systems. One you could shut down during the winter season. You need to take that into consideration, because as well, we've seen some projects, people, and they have a good project, they have a barn, they want to renovate it, and small cottages, but they run out of money. It happened. But then the sizing was done based on your plans for 20p. So that needs to be, look at your project, what do you want to do? when do you want to do it, and make sure you have the budget. Sizing as well depends from one country to another one. In France, we use number of rooms, offices, toilets, living space. If you have a living room which is over 50 square meters, it counts for one person. When, for example, in Ireland, it's very simple. You have four bedrooms in Ireland. It will be a 6P because we'll count 2 people for the first bedroom, 2 people for the second bedroom, and one for the 2 other bedrooms. So it's a 6P. For small commercial, I said, you might need to have 2 independent systems. It will be easier for you to manage, and you could shut down one of the systems during the winter. Few things to check. Make sure that in France, the system you buy has a French agreement. And you can find the list of systems with the French agreement on the CERIB or the CERIB website. Or on the ministry website, you have the list of systems with the French agreement. Make sure that the person that you are dealing with have the liability insurance for 10 years, what we call the decennial. Make sure how easy it is to access your site. Because as mentioned earlier by Karen, sometimes lorries cannot go on site. And we've seen that, and then you're just facing there, I cannot access the site. In some extreme cases in France, what we had to do, we had to deliver the septic tank by helicopter. As simple as that, because there was no road or no track to reach out to the house. How much space is required? Check the different type of tanks there is on the market. You have the plastic ones, concrete ones, fiberglass ones. All the fiberglass, they all have their pros and cons, depending on the weight, depending on the structure of the tank. Plastic is lighter, it's about 200 kg, 300 kg. Concrete tanks, it's about 3.5 tons. So again, you might need machinery to bring that tank, on your site. Fiberglass, it's in between, 500 kg. Desludging and maintenance of it is up to the homeowner. It's the responsibility of the homeowner to make sure the system is working properly and desludging is organized. Again, depending on how often the system is used. Again, but you need to make sure you're on site because bacteria will start to die between 4 to 5 days because there is no organic matter, and it will take up to 4 to 5, 6 weeks maybe to start again, to go again and to do their job. It's best for you to have a maintenance and service contract. The Spanx and water police, they love to see them. They are happy and they're reassured. Make sure you read the installation manual from the manufacturer. That's very important, especially where do you want to install your tank in your garden? Do you want to have, can the place you are can be flooded? Do you need to anchor your tank on a concrete slab? Do you want to have driving traffic? So then you'll have maybe to have a concrete slab on top of it, but that will have to be calculated by the Bureau d'études, the BE. All that needs to be checked. Check the media which is used in your compact filter and does it need to be replaced. How often does it need to be replaced? Can it be recycled? We've seen some cases where the media cannot be recycled in some of the competition. So the homeowner is left with the media on the back of the garden. And choose wisely your TP. That's very, very important for you. You will rely on your TP, terrassier or ground worker. And again, as a reminder here, sometimes we all want to take some shortcuts or pay a bit less. By law in France, you cannot have a transaction in cash over €1,000 and make sure you get an invoice, especially from trade people and small commercials. Now, who is Tricel? We've been in France for 10 years. We have 2 factories, one in Poitiers, one in Avignon. Our tanks are made in France. We have a nationwide coverage. We have 17 exclusive distributors. We provide and they provide delivery and commissioning. And we provide as well maintenance contracts, service contracts. And our product are the Novo for the microstation, Simplex for compact filter. And now we're introducing a new range for bigger commercial, which is called the Tricel Maxus, which are just after launching at the moment. Now, you can find all the information on our website, and you can find as well our brochures, which are available in English on our website. That's it for me. Sorry.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. for explaining those different options available. So I'm going to put a couple of your questions to Jean-Philippe now. Let me just get them up. Okay, first question. I have an old property with a fosse septique. What would the benefits be of installing a microstation instead?
In microstation, well, again, it depends on the house. I mean, house. You might need either a microstation or a compact filter. The fosse septic basically is just a tank, and you'll have to empty it on a regular basis. Okay. If you have a microstation, then you'll have a compressor, so a diffuser, and then there's a whole cycle of bringing oxygen to the bacteria. So the treatment is better. There is treatment involved in a microstation where there's no as such treatment involved in a fosse septic. Now, if it's a holiday home, you will have to go for a compact filter because the Spanx don't like microstations if it's a holiday home because of the energy required for the treatment of the waters. That's treatment in a microstation, no treatment in a fosse septic.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, another question. Is it possible to purchase a microstation or compact filter and install it myself?
Yes, we've seen that, we've done that. Now you need to go back to the manual, the installation manual. So that needs to be done according to the manual. But we've seen it. Some people are very good at DIY, did it. It works well. It is possible. Get advice, make sure it's well installed. Just because as a homeowner, then you will carry the decennial responsibility if you sell your house within 10 years. So, you know, if I do it myself, I sell it to you, Zoe, I'm responsible now. You can turn on, you can come back to me and I'm responsible because I carried out the work.
Right, yeah, that goes back to what Arthur was talking about earlier.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. Great, thank you for that, Jean-Philippe. So I'm now going to open up the questions again to our whole panel. I'll just check I've still got everybody with us. Arthur, are you still there?
Yeah, anyway, just throw my button back on. Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Great. Carmel, do we still have you?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Great, and Karen?
Yes, hi.
Brilliant, everyone's here. Okay, right, let's see what we've got. Okay, first question is for Arthur. I'm looking to buy a property in France and plan to renovate it and perhaps add a swimming pool in the future. What do I need to be aware of at the buying stage?
Okay, so from a renovation point of view, first of all, it depends, as I mentioned earlier on the level of renovation. So from a planning point of view, if renovations are significant, you might just want to make sure in your purchase contract there's a suspensive condition giving you an opt-out, if you like, if you can't actually achieve the project in the future. Same applies for the swimming pool. You can't always put a pool in a garden or in a property, and sometimes where you can do that, there's a limit on the size. So you need to be aware of those things at the outset and make sure that there's a condition in the contract that allows you, if during the process permission is not granted, you could withdraw from the purchase contract if you wish to. And there's no penalty involved in doing that. Sometimes the notaire may say, well, I've done a bit of work, so you owe me €200, but you can actually get your deposit back and actually cancel the purchase contract under those circumstances. Just very quickly on the swimming pool front, you will see a lot of misinformation, I should say, out there about above ground pools. An above ground pool requires consent. The only ones that don't are the temporary blow up versions that you see dotted around for kids to jump in and out of in the summer. But otherwise, anything over 10 square meters of surface area, whether they be above ground, part above and part in ground, or fully in ground, requires consent.
All right, so that's really important for anybody who's looking to add a swimming pool to their property. Okay, next question for Carmel. We've recently opened a chambre d'hôte and have received some lovely reviews. However, this is not translating to more bookings. What can we do to boost our profile?
Chambre d'hôte. You may consider creating your own website. Some people like to do blogs and talk about, you know, the local area or the season and the various activity during the course of the season. You know, think about what is unique, what's your unique selling point about your chambre d'hôte, and talk about that on there, what's attractive about the area, and you know, use social media. Basically, that's a great way of you know, attracting attention, and always ask your visitors to, you know, post a review for you, especially if they've really enjoyed their stay.
Great, some really good advice there. Okay, Karen, a question for you. Where is it? Let me find it. Here we go. We need to use a removals company to help with our move to France, but we don't have an unlimited budget. Is there anything we can do ourselves to keep costs down?
Absolutely. You could do your own packing. So to give you an idea of how we work out our prices, there's two different routes for us for taking your items out. We can just come and collect your items, take your items out, and that's all we do. So we call that a standalone removal. So you would be bearing the cost of all the ferries, the fuel, payage, staff, etc. But if you had a smaller load to go, and as I say, we tend to take the 18-ton lorries over, some with a trailer on, and they are about 40 foot long, so they're big lorries. But if you can go as what we call a part load, we reduce the price considerably because we can take someone else out in the same vehicle, everything's sectioned off. So if a little bit of flexibility with your dates as well. But if you do all your own packing and preparation, so that all we need to do is come and collect everything and then take it over to France, then that certainly is the most cost-effective way of doing it. Being a little bit flexible with your dates as well, so that we can match a person in a similar situation and take you all out on the same trip.
Brilliant, some great advice there for saving a few pennies. Right, a question for Jean-Philippe. What kind of sewage treatment system would you recommend for a second home that is empty around 6 months a year?
I would go for a compact filter, sorry. Just back to the regulations, and because the spank, the water police, will not sign off on anything else.
Okay.
Because, just said again, no energy used on the compact filter.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, next question is for Arthur. I'm just going to find it. Right, I have a structure on my property that doesn't have a planning permit. Can I apply for retrospective planning permission in France?
Yes, you can. The process is exactly the same as if the structure wasn't there and you wanted to put it there. The only issue is whether the regulations, the local regulations for that structure would allow for it to be there. And that's something you need to be really mindful of, because if you, I mean, I don't know what this structure is, but let's assume for the sake of argument it was a garage or a garden shed. If the planning regulations don't allow for that to be built and you apply for retrospective permission, then the answer will be no, and you could actually be forced to take it down. So before you actually apply for that, then you need to make sure of what the regulations are. One further point that's really important, depends how long it's been there as to whether or not there's likely to be an issue for keeping it there and applying for consent. As a general rule, when the property is sold, the notaire will ask the current owner for any planning consents that have been applied for in the last 10 years and any works that have been carried out that would have required planning consent in the last 10 years. And if the vendor says, no, I haven't done any of those things, and that is the truth, then when you as the new owner buy it, pretty much no one's going to come to you and say, now you need to knock that down. But if it's only been there recently, or if you've put it up yourselves and realize you should have applied for consent, then you need to check the regulations before you do, just to make sure you don't end up in deeper water than you might already be in.
Okay, great. Really good advice there. Okay, question for Carmel. This is quite a general question, but I'm sure you will have some advice to offer on this. What advice would you give to somebody looking to buy a second home in France? What sort of things should you consider when choosing the right property?
This is interesting because we have people wanting to join our network and wanting to work in France, but not necessarily knowing where in France they want to live. So sometimes we do answer this question anyway. I would say, you know, to be honest, it's about, you know, when you wake up in the morning and you open your windows and you think, well, that makes my heart sing, I'm in France, you know. I think it's unique to everybody. So what we're thinking about is, what is it about France that you love? Is it the coast? Is it the forest? Is it the mountains? And kind of try and narrow down your search there. And so, I think the place is the most important thing, where you decide to make your home, the first and foremost, because, if you're not happy with the location, then, I think, that's so fundamental to your life in France that, it's likely that other things won't follow and won't work for you either. Maybe anyone else would like to add to that?
No.
All right.
Okay. Question for Karen. Where is it? Let me find it. Is it worth taking out removals insurance, and what are the options available?
Okay, so with our insurers, and as I say, they're one of the biggest, so it's the same for most removal companies. We offer the optional insurance. Insurance is one of those sort of, it's a Marmite thing, isn't it? Some people, I must admit, I'm one of the people, if insurance is offered, I take it. But one thing that we do point out when we provide the original quotation and if asked, is that the insurance that removal companies offer more often than not is not based on a new for old basis. It's what they call on an indemnity basis. So if we were to damage your television and it was 5 years old, you wouldn't get what you paid for it 5 years ago or what the replacement value is today. Insurance companies have a sliding scale for reducing the value of an item depending on its age. So it's really entirely up to you. If you don't take the insurance that we offer, you have what's called limited liability cover, which means that and it's all in our terms and conditions, but in the event of Cranbury's damaging any of your items, our liability to you is limited to £40 per item, pair or set. I would suggest it needs updating, but I guess the idea behind it was it would cover the cost of the excess if you were to claim on your household insurance. Obviously, moving from one country to another, more often than not, you don't get cover continued from one property to the other. So really, the answer to your question is it's entirely up to you. We have an excellent claims history or non-claims history with our insurers. Our renewal date is the 1st of December, and this year we've had to make no claims at all. Our lads are very careful, and this is where back at the beginning of the presentation that I gave, we talked about export wrapping. Everything's, particularly precious items are export wrap, like your large pictures, ornate mirrors. But everything else, actually, as it gets loaded onto the lorry, is wrapped in removal blankets. So inevitably, as the lorry is trundling down the road, things sort of move against each other. But because everything's wrapped in blankets, there doesn't tend to be any damage. Having said that, accidents do happen. So, we're a pretty honest company. If we happen to scratch or break something, we will bring it to your attention. And obviously we would work with you then to put it right. But insurance as a whole is optional. And it's entirely up to you whether you want to take it. It's your call, really, I'm afraid.
Great, thanks for that, Karen. And that is really reassuring, I think, to know. Right, Jean-Philippe, question for you.
Yes.
I've heard that there are government grants or funding available to help with installing a microstation. Is this true? And can I benefit from this even if I'm not resident in France?
There were grants. There are less and less grants, depends on where you live in the department. So you need to check with the local authorities if you can get the grant. It's not nationwide. It depends on the region and your county if you want. And there were grants more available for compact filters than micro stations. Okay, so that you need to check locally. That needs to be checked.
Okay,
it
great.
varies from one place to another one, but they tend to disappear. Okay, there have been less and less grants at the moment. Okay, so
so that needs to be checked locally, and yes. If you do receive a grant, it's probably a good advice to seize the opportunity whilst it's available.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Arthur, Let me get my questions back up. Right, one quick question and then I'll ask you another one. Jack says, for planning purposes, is a polytunnel a greenhouse?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just going to just very quickly expand on that. Any structure that covers the ground in France is a construction, and that actually includes open pergolas as well. So it doesn't even have to have a roof on it to be considered a structure in France from a planning point of view, but also from a tax point of view. An open pergola type arrangement, you won't pay any tax on, but you will pay tax on a polytunnel for any area within the polytunnel that exceeds 1.8 meters height.
Right, okay, that's really important to know. Okay, next question for you, Arthur. Do you need planning permission if you do interior structural work, for example, knocking down an interior wall?
No, not as such. The only proviso I would say is that if you were knocking down a structural wall to open up between a house and, for example, a barn or a garage in order to convert the other area, then you'd need consent for that. But in terms of knocking down walls, whether they be structural or otherwise internally, provided that makes no difference to the taxable space or the outside appearance, then no, you don't.
Okay, great. Right, Carmel. Let me find my questions again. Here we go. Do les Bons Voisins advise on properties to rent long term for those who want to rent before they buy in France?
We don't advise on these, but we have had some experience of helping people to find a property to rent in France. So yeah, the short answer is yes, we can help with this. You should also approach the local immobilier agent. They often have knowledge of properties that are available to rent. And also bear in mind the lease conditions, and it's important to understand what you're signing up to there.
Yeah, that's good.
Like I said, we've had some experience of that. So yes, we can help, but generally speaking, no, we don't have a list of properties available for long-term rent. That said, some of our owners whose properties we look after are more and more inclined to consider doing that, especially if they can't get to France for a considerable period of time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another question for you, Carmel, whilst I have you. Can you help collecting and depositing monthly rent payments on time?
No, we don't tend to handle money transactions. Even for seasonal rentals, we ensure that things are set up so that any monetary transactions go straight to the owner. We don't get involved in the monetary transactions ourselves.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. Right, a final question for Karen. Let me find it. Do I need to be at the property in France when the removals team arrives?
No, not at all. As long as you're happy. We've had people post us keys to the UK and just said, just go and do it for us, please. Or a couple that we're doing in December, the owners have already come back to the UK, so we've arranged with the local estate agent to be given admission. If you're happy to let us in and we know what we've got to collect, either everything or just a list, we're more than happy to do that, and either lock up when we come back, bring the keys with us, or drop them to a neighbour or whatever. It really is, you know, completely flexible, especially, and of course we've had to be over the last 18 months or so, but yeah, more than happy to do that.
Brilliant. Okay, final question for Jean-Philippe. I'm looking to purchase a property in France with a fosse septique. What questions should I ask before buying?
Check with the seller, and if the system is up to the norms. When it was changed last time, check if there is any history in the system about dislodging, what I would call kind of a book of life, you know, any history about the system, and check if it's up to the regulations. When was it built? Maybe 10 years, 20 years ago. And if it's not up to the regulations, then it might be a negotiating point when you buy or sell a house in France.
Okay, that's really good advice for property buyers. Right. Yeah. That's all we have time for today. Thank you very much to all of you who attended, and thank you very much to our panel for giving up their time and answering all your questions today. If we didn't get around to your questions, please do keep an eye on the FrenchEntrée website over the coming months. And you can also put any additional questions to us at webinar@FrenchEntrée.com. If you enjoyed today's webinar, if you found it useful, keep an eye out for more FrenchEntrée webinars over the coming months. Little sneak peek, we do have a webinar in the works aimed at our American audience who are looking to purchase property or move to France. And we also have a webinar plan that will be specifically focusing on healthcare and health insurance. And that will cover questions for second homeowners, retirees, and those moving to France. So if you don't want to miss out on those, the best thing to do is to head over to the FrenchEntrée website and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. And finally, do let us know what you thought of today's webinar. Did you enjoy it? What can we improve on? What topics would you like to see us to cover in upcoming webinars? You can drop us an email on webinar@FrenchEntrée.com. Thank you once again to everyone for attending. Thank you one last time to our panel, and we'll hopefully see you all on the next webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.